Thanks to Hostinger for sponsoring this video. Hostinger is an incredible web hosting provider where you can set up shared hosting, cloud hosting, VPS hosting, email hosting, and SSL certificates. Hostinger has made a name for itself due to its fast load time, simplicity, free domains, and powerful servers. You can find my affiliate link in the description down below for 10% discount of your next order. What's up developers, it's Dari here, and welcome back to a new video where we will learn the basics of Laravel in 1 hour. Are you new to Laravel, or did you just learn PHP, and are you ready for the next step to learn a PHP framework but don't know which one? You just clicked on the right video. In this video, we will cover the basics of the Laravel framework. Keep in mind that we won't cover every single topic that Laravel has to offer in depth. If you do want that, I have a 6 and a 5-hour Laravel for Beginners course, which I will link in the description down below. Quick note, we won't go over the installation tools, since that can take up to 30 minutes. I want to straight dive into installing a Laravel project to waste no time. Now for the developers here that are completely new to Laravel, let's start with the most important question. What is Laravel? Laravel is an open source PHP framework which in my opinion is very easy to understand once you get a good base of procedural and object-oriented PHP. It follows one of the most known design patterns, which is the Model View Controller Framework, so MVC. Frameworks like Laravel, Symfony, and CodeIgniter are built on loads of packages that are developed by other developers. But most importantly, they are maintained by other developers as well. With the use of a framework, you don't need to think about configuration files, service providers, or prescribed directory structures. If you haven't learned PHP before, this video isn't for you. Because I'm not going to set up PHP, MySQL, and so on. I'm going to straight dive into installing and setting up a Laravel project through Composer. Now Laravel offers 2 ways to create a new project. Both ways require the use of the command line interface, which I will refer to from now on as the CLI. The first method is to globally install the Laravel installer tool with the help of Composer. So inside the CLI, you need to run the Composer, global, require, Laravel/installer. This installs the Laravel installer tool, but doesn't create a new directory for you where a Laravel project has been added. This needs to be done through the Laravel installer, where we can write down a Laravel, new, followed with a project name, which will also be your directory name. So let's name our project Laravel app. Now what this command will do right here is simply creating a new directory structure where you are located inside the CLI with the name of Laravel app and a skeleton Laravel project. Now the second method is using Composer to install a Laravel project. So let's run the Composer, create -project, --prefer-dist, Laravel/Laravel, and let's name our project Laravel app. Now the prefer-dist option tells Composer to download and install the distribution, so zip files, of the packages instead of cloning their Git repository. So once we hit enter right now, you'll see that our Laravel project is being installed. Now there are multiple ways of how you can run your Laravel project inside the browser. For beginners, I recommend navigating into the project directory that we have just created by saying cd of change directory into our Laravel app directory. Where right here, we have the option to use an artisan command, and I will cover artisan in a bit. So let's for now run the php artisan serve command. Now what this command will do is spinning up the local host right here with the port of 8000. Now if we copy this entire route, navigate to the browser, and replace our URL with the URL that we just copied, hit enter, you will see that we have spinned up our first Laravel project. For now, I want to open my project inside PHP Storm. I recommend you to do the same so we could dive into setting up our database credentials inside our project. Now I don't want to cover all directories and files that you will see right here as a separate chapter, but we will cover them along the way. Whenever I spin up a new Laravel application, I usually make sure that I set up my database credential first, because I don't want to create a static web application. In 99% of the cases, I need to interact with a database to pull in data. Laravel makes use of environment variables, which are variables that are expected to be different in each environment. Because it's different in each environment, Laravel has created a hidden .env file in the root of our project, where the dot makes sure that the file is hidden, and it won't be pushed to version control. There are tons of environment variables right here that I won't cover, but the ones we need to be able to connect with our database are the environment variables, starting with db underscore right here. Right here, you will see that the default connection is a MySQL database. The host is the host that we have opened inside the browser. The port is 3306. The database name right here has been set equal to Laravel. But for now, let's change it to Laravel app. Now the following two should be equal to your MySQL credentials. The username and password are the two credentials you use to interact with your local database. In my case, my username is root and my password is Dari1234. If you have added the correct credentials, you most likely haven't created your database. You could either create your database through MySQL CLI or an external database client, but ever since the release of Laravel 9, Laravel added an option through the CLI where you could create a database through Artisan as well. Now let's cover Artisan real quick because I said that we would do. And Artisan is a command line interface included with a framework that provides a number of helpful commands for developers, such as creating controllers, generating boilerplate code, and running database migrations. It basically makes your job so much easier because you don't need to define classes and files from scratch. Now let's test it out. Well, let's navigate to the CLI, where right here we can write down PHP Artisan, and that's how you make use of Artisan. Once we hit enter, you'll find a complete list of commands that you can perform. And let me actually zoom out a little bit. Alright. Some of these you will use within any application. You can see that they have tons of commands. And some of these you will probably never use. Now one built-in command that Artisan has to offer is the PHP Artisan migrate command. Now let me zoom in again. Alright. Which is a command that Laravel offers to run your database tables. Now once we hit enter, you will see that Laravel is prompting us with a message saying that a database does not exist inside our MySQL connection that we have defined right here, because it's looking for a database with the name of Laravel app. So let's navigate back, and let's say that we want to create our database. Artisan has responded back with some kind of message. It's first telling us that it has created our migration tables, and it has migrated 4 tables right here. Well, we haven't created those migrations, and these migrations right here are created by the framework itself and are added in any default project. So let's talk about migrations for a bit. In MVC, you usually want to start with defining the models, which will pull data from the database. But before we could use any model, we obviously need to make sure that we have our tables ready. With Laravel, you don't create your database tables manually as you do with PHP, which you are most likely familiar with. You have probably worked with a database client or PHPMyAdmin before, where you had to click on buttons to create tables. In Laravel, we define something which is called migrations. And a migration is essentially a single file where you define your database tables through code. If we navigate back to our project, you'll see that any Laravel project has a directory named database. Once we open it, you'll find a couple subdirectories, the factory subdirectory, migration subdirectory, and the Cedar subdirectory. Now once we open our migrations table, and let me make the sidebar a little bit bigger right here, you will find 4 migrations, and if we look at the names, so create users table, password reset tokens, failed jobs, navigate back to iTerm, you'll find the same exact names. So whenever you run the PHP Artisan migrate command, it will look inside the migrations directory in the database directory. Now there are a couple rules that you have to follow when it comes to migrations. They are always run in order by date, and they allow you to create, modify, and delete database tables and columns, as well as defining indexes and foreign key constraints. As you can see right here, all files start with a year, so 2014 and 2019, followed with a month, so the 10th, 8th, and 12th, and a timestamp. Then you can see that they all start with a keyword of create right here, followed with a table name, so users, password reset tokens, fills jobs, and personal access token, and they all end with an underscore table. Keep in mind that everything will be stripped off once you run your migrations, so your table will only be named users, only be named password reset tokens, and so on. Now the first migration for the users table creates the users table with the necessary columns for user authentication. The second table is the password resets table, which is used for password reset functionality. Then we have the failed jobs table, which is used to store failed queue jobs. And we have the personal access tokens table, which is used for API token authentication. Now let's open one. Let's open the users table. Let me make the sidebar a little bit smaller again. All right. Every migration has two methods inside of it. As you can see, it has an up method, and at the bottom, you will find a down method. Now the up method right here will be run once you migrate your migration through the PHP artisan migrate command. The down method, right at the bottom, allows you to roll back the most recent set of migrations, where you will see that it uses a schema object right here, where it is making a call to the drop if exist method, where it will drop the users table. Now inside the up method, you will see that it's using the schema facade again, and a facade is something you will hear and see tons in Laravel. So let's talk about them for a moment. Facade is essentially a class that provides a static interface to a service provided by the application. It acts as a proxy for accessing the underlying object, allowing developers to use a simple and intuitive syntax to interact with complex functionalities. Right here, you will see that the schema facade is using the create method. Now through the table object of the blueprint class, you'll see that you can build up a lot of tables. Now let's create a new migration instead of doing that manually. Let's navigate to the CLI, and since Artisan has a command for pretty much every action, you could run the PHP artisan make command, followed with a colon, because we're going to say what we're going to make. And in our case, we're going to create a new migration. Then we should name it as create_articles_table. But before we hit enter, let's hit backspace for a moment to the PHP artisan command, because we do need to have a model which we can use inside our controller to do something with the data. In most cases, I recommend using the PHP artisan make model command. In Laravel, it is recommended to name your model singular. So let's name it article. And then we're going to add something which is used quite a lot in Laravel, and that's the use of flags. In Laravel Artisan, flags are additional options that you could add to Artisan commands to modify their behavior or perform specific actions. They are usually represented by a hyphen, followed with a letter or a word. In our current example, we're going to add the -m flag, which is used to generate a migration file along with the model file. Quick note, flags are specific to each Artisan command and can vary depending on the command being executed. Now let's hit enter, and right here, you can see that it has created a new model for us inside the app models directory, and it has created a new migration for us, named created articles table. We won't cover the model yet, so let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and let's open the latest migration, which is for the articles table, as you can see right here. Now let's define the columns for our articles table. Every table has a unique primary key, which has been added through the table object right here, where it has access to the ID method. A primary key is necessary in a database table to uniquely identify each record. It ensures that each record in the table can be accessed and manipulated individually. Now, the table object also uses the timestamps method right here, which will add a created_at and an updated_at timestamp column to your table. Now let's build up other columns. Every article has been created by a user, so we need to add a column where we store the user ID of the user that has created the article, which we need to do through a foreign key constraint. The two methods that you will see right here, so ID and timestamps, basically shows you how you can define other columns. This needs to be done through method chaining. A method chaining in Laravel is a technique where multiple methods are called in a single line of code, with each method returning an object or instance that allows the next method to be called on. This allows for more concise and readable code structure. So let's use our table object, and for now, I want to create a foreign ID. Now inside our foreign ID method, we can pass in a string, which will name the column. So let's say user_ID. Then we're going to chain a method to it, so method chaining. And usually for code readability, I'll try to do that on the line below with the name of constraint. This will ensure that the value in the foreign key column matches the value in the primary key column of the reference table. Then I'm going to add another method to it on the line below named cascade on delete, which means that if a reference record is deleted, all associated records in the child table will also be deleted automatically. This helps to maintain referential integrity and ensures that the data remains consistent. Now let's add a couple other tables. Let's say table. We're going to define a string, which will eventually convert it to a var char in MySQL, where we're going to name it the title of our article. We're going to use our table object, the method name of long text, which will convert it to text. It's going to be an excerpt, and we're going to chain the nullable method to it. Now the nullable method has a default of true, but we're going to pass in false right here because we're going to give our excerpt the option to be nullable. Then we're going to add our table object. We're going to create another long text, which will be for our description. So if you don't add the nullable method to it, it has a default of required. And then I'm going to use my table object because I want to create an integer column as well with the name of minutes to read. Now we have run the PHP artisan migrate command once, right? Well, let's navigate back to iTerm. Now let's perform a clear right here. All right. Now the 4 default migrations have been migrated, but our articles table has not been migrated yet. So how does this work? Well, let's run the PHP artisan migrate status command for a moment. When you run the PHP artisan migrate command, Laravel creates a migration table in your database to keep track of the migrations that have been executed. The migrate status command queries the table to determine the status of each migration. The output right here typically includes the migration name right here, the batch, and the status, which is running or pending. This helps you to identify which migrations have been run and which ones are pending or have been rolled back. Right here, you will see that the first 4 have been run, but the articles table right here is pending. So what we could do right here is simply running the PHP artisan migrate command. And as you can see, it has not run all the other migrations, but only the pending migration. And if we run PHP artisan migrate status again, you will see that they all have been set equal to run. Now let's navigate back to PHP Storm for a moment. And I do got to mention that there are tons of other fields of data types that we could define. I try to define the most important ones, but keep in mind that these will all be converted to data types in MySQL. Laravel recently added a pretty cool command which we can perform inside the CLI. So let's navigate back to it for a moment, perform a clear, and let's run the PHP artisan model command, show, followed with the model name. So let's say article. Now, we do need Doctrine debug for this, so let's install it real quick. Alright, perform a clear. Let's hit the arrow up twice, and let's run the command that we just mentioned. And this command displays a thorough overview of any Eloquent model in your application, where it includes its available attributes and the relationships. Right here, you will see that our ID is auto-increment and it should be unique. We have a user ID, which has been converted to an unsigned big integer, an excerpt, which has been set equal to text, and so on. Pretty cool. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into our model. In Laravel, models are stored inside the app directory, where you will find a models directory. Now let me close off my migration. Alright. Now right here, you will find a default user model and an article model that we have created. Now every Laravel model extends the model class. And this model class offers tons of methods and properties that you can define to customize your model. Models are an integral part of the framework's object relational mapper system called Eloquent. Models represent database tables and define the interaction with those tables. They allow you to perform database operations such as querying, inserting, updating, and deleting records. The use of models has quite a lot of benefits compared to any other framework. It provides a structured way to interact with the database, making it easy to organize and manage data. In most MVC projects, you don't have a migration and all that is defined inside the model. By using migrations and models together, you can easily define and manage the database structure and the corresponding logic of manipulating the data. Now, if we take a look at the naming convention of our model real quick, you will see that it has created an articles table for us, and the model it has generated is a singular form of it, named article. In Laravel, the model knows which table to use based on this naming convention. Laravel assumes that the table name is the plural form of the model's name, with the first letter of the model name being capitalized. Since we have a model named article, Laravel will assume that the corresponding table is named articles, so we don't need to define anything to say which table it needs to interact with. However, if your table name does not follow this convention, which I'm highly against, you can override a property to pretty much tell Laravel that the article model needs to interact with another table. To override properties, we need to write down protected, followed with the property name, which in our case will be table, which we need to set equal to a string, which will be the new name. So let's say news_articles. Now we don't need this, so let's remove it. And since we're limited on time, I want to define a couple important properties, where the first property is the protected fillable property, which we need to set equal to an array. Now the fillable property in Laravel is used to specify which attributes are mass assignable. Mass assignment is a feature that allows you to create or update multiple model attributes at once. By default, Laravel protects against mass assignment by requiring you to explicitly define which attributes can be mass assigned. This is a security measure to prevent unintended changes to sensitive data. The fillable property should contain an array of attribute names that are allowed to be mass assigned, while any other attribute will be ignored. So what fields should be mass assigned? Well, the user_ID, the title, the excerpt, the description, and the minutes to read. We have kept the timestamps method inside our migration, which created a updated_at and a created_at column. In your Laravel model, you can cast this to a different format through the cast property. So let's say protected casts is also equal to an array. Now, the cast property in Laravel model is used to specify the data type of certain attributes. It allows you to define attributes as specific data types such as booleans, integers, dates, arrays, and JSON. So let's say that our updated_at should be a date time, and our created_at should also be a date time. Now the final thing I would like to define inside our model is a relationship. Now Laravel has tons of relationships that you could use, but I want to stick to one relationship, which is the relationship between the articles and users table. Let's think about it. One article is created by one user, while one user can create multiple articles. Does that make sense? When defining relationships, I always advise developers to say it out loud as a sentence. This allows you to see whether it makes sense or not. Now for this, we need to define a one-to-many relationship. In a one-to-many relationship, a single record in the first table, which in our case is the articles table, can be associated with multiple records in the second table. However, each record in the second table can be associated with at most one record in the first table. Now when defining relationships, you can follow Laravel's naming convention. You first need to define a new method inside the article model. So let's say public function. Now the naming convention for the one-to-many relationship is to use the plural or singular form of the related model followed with an S. But this depends on the type of relationship. Since one article is associated to one user, we should use a singular form of user. Then inside our relationship, we need to add the return keyword, where we need to return this belongs to. The belongs to is a method in Laravel's eloquent ORM that defines a belongs to relationship between two models. It does accept an argument because we need to pass in the model's class name as an argument. In our case, it should be the user model, don't forget to pull it in, and add the class to it. Now, ever since Laravel 10, we need to type int it. So what we could do is saying, well, colon belongs to, pull it in, and the warning is gone. Now, this only defines the relationship from the article to the user, meaning that you can only access the user from the article and not the articles from the user. To do so, we need to define a relationship the other way around as well. So let's open our user model, scroll to the bottom, and right here, we can use the same methodology. So let's say public function, and one user has multiple articles, right? So we're not going to define a singular method named article, but a plural method named articles. Now with my previous sentence, I kind of spoiled what we should return right here, because we're going to return this has many. And it has many article models. And that's it. Now let's move on to the next chapter where we're going to focus on controllers and routing. In MVC, the controller is responsible for handling user requests, processing input, and interacting with the model to retrieve or modify data. It basically receives input from the user, such as a form submission or URL parameters, and decides how to respond based on the requested action. Just like we have generated our migration with a model file, we could do the same thing to generate a controller with it. Now let me show you how that works. Let's navigate to iTerm for a moment. So let's say PHP artisan make me a new model. Let's name it article. We have added the -f flag ourselves, and let's add a -c flag to it as well, which will basically generate a controller for you. Now this won't work right now because we have already an article model in migration, so let's remove it, and let's use the make controller command to generate a single controller file. In Laravel, the naming convention for controller names is to use the singular form of the associated model followed with controller. Since our model is named article, the corresponding controller should be article controller. If we hit enter right now, you will see that a controller has been generated. If we navigate back to PHP Storm for a moment, look inside of our app directory, you will find an HTTP directory. The HTTP directory is a directory within the Laravel application structure that contains classes related to handling HTTP requests and responses. It is named like this, so HTTP, because it specifically deals with the HTTP layer of the application. You will find classes such as controllers, middlewares, form requests, and other classes related to handling HTTP-related tasks. So as you could see, it has a controller directory inside of it, and if we open it, you will find a skeleton controller class, which is the default controller all controllers will extend. But if we open the article controller, you will find our skeleton controller that we have generated through Artisan. Now, Laravel uses namespaces for everything, and namespaces are used extensively to organize and structure the application's code. By using namespaces, classes and other code elements can be grouped together and easily referenced from other parts of your application. It obviously has its own class, which has been set equal to the name of the file, which you should always have equal to. Then you'll see that it's extending the base controller, which allows you to easily customize and override methods as needed. If you do that, you will basically use code reusability, modularity, and maintainability by providing a consistent structure and behavior across controllers. Now, this is pretty cool, but Laravel has even a way cooler function, which is defining resource controllers. And resource controllers in Laravel are a feature that allows you to define a single controller class to handle multiple related HTTP actions for a particular resource. By using resource controllers, you can group common CRUD operations, so create, read, update, and delete, for a resource into a single controller class. And this is very helpful for code organization because it reduces duplication and it makes it easier to maintain and update your code. Let's delete our article controller for a moment. Alright, let's navigate back to the CLI and let's hit the arrow up because we're going to perform the last command that we have performed, but we're going to add a -- resource flag to it. Once we perform our command, navigate back to PHP Storm, you'll see that it has generated the article controller for us. You will see that this has generated a controller class with the necessary methods to handle CRUD operations for the article resource. And it has already defined the parameters, as you could see right here, and well, a couple other methods. Now, usually I recommend working your way down with these methods because it does have a logical flow. On web applications, you'll usually start with the homepage of a resource. And let's think about a blog for a moment. You start with a blog overview, right? Which is the index method of a resource controller. Now here comes some magic, because we need to use our model this time to retrieve all the articles that we have. Well, we currently have 0, but that doesn't matter. Let's define a new variable inside our index method named posts. And here comes some Laravel magic, because we need to use our model this time to retrieve all the articles that we have and then send it back to the view. Let's set it equal to the article model, and don't forget to hit enter to import the use statement of the app_models class. So once we do that and scroll up, you will see that it has been imported into our class. You will see that PHP Storm will automatically add a double set of colons, and this is called the scope resolution operator. It is used to access static methods, constants, and properties of a class without needing to create an instance of the class itself. Now, one static method that I want to use is the all method. The all method is a method provided by Laravel's eloquent ORM that retrieves all the records from the specified table. Now, quick note, the all method is not the best method to use when working with large number of records because it will retrieve all the records at once. What I recommend right here is replacing the all method with the paginate method. And quick note, it's impossible to cover all eloquent methods in one video, not even if the video was hours long. Laravel offers so many functionalities, so I'm only going to cover a couple important ones. Now, pagination helps in breaking down the results into smaller, more manageable chunks called pages. Each page contains a specific number of records, known as the page size. The paginate method takes one optional argument inside the opening and closing parenthesis, which determines the number of records to be displayed per page. If you want to display 10 records per page, you simply need to add 10 right here. Quick note, the paginate method has a default value of 15, which I'm completely fine with it, so let's get rid of it. Now, this is all cool, but how do we show something to the user? Now, in Laravel, you need to return something, which is called the view method, which is used to render a view and return it as a response to the user request. The view method takes the view file name as its argument, as a string, and it will return an instance of the Illuminate view class, which represents the rendered view. Views in Laravel are not stored next to your controller, but inside the root of your project, you will find a directory named resources. And once we open it, you will find a subdirectory named views. And if we open this one, you will find one view named welcome.blade.php, which is the default page that you will see right here. Now, what I want to do is creating a new subdirectory named articles. And I recommend naming the view the same as the method. So what I recommend right here is creating a new file named index.blade.php. Now, we haven't talked about Blade. And Blade is a templating engine used by Laravel for rendering views. It provides an easy and expressive syntax for writing dynamic and reusable HTML templates. Blade has its own syntax and way to perform logic, which we won't cover in this video, but you can basically say, well, add if, which will create an if statement for you, add for, which will create a for loop for you, and you have tons of other features such as add empty. Now, let's open our article controller because we need to tell our view which view it needs to render. And since we got it stored inside a subdirectory, we need to add a subdirectory as well. So let's say articles. And in Laravel, you don't use slashes right here to define the file, but you use dots. And dots are used to indicate nested hierarchical routes. Now the route that we want to show is the index, but we're not going to add the .blade.php right here. Laravel automatically assumes that the view files are Blade templates and adds the .blade.php extension for you. This is a convenient feature provided by Laravel to simplify the syntax when rendering views. Let's actually rename my post variable to articles. I'm not really sure why I named it posts. Now, right now, we need to make sure that we send our articles variable back to the view, right? Now, Laravel offers two methods. Well, multiple, but I recommend two. The first method is adding a second argument to the view method, which is a method named compact. The compact method is pretty cool because it will automatically detect the variable based on their names. So we could pass in a string right here of articles, which Laravel will automatically link to the variable articles that we have right above. Now the second method is removing the compact method, pass in an array, where we need to pass in a key value pair. The key will be accessed in the view, so let's say articles, while the value is the actual value that you want to output. So let's say variable articles. Now personally, I'm a bit more fan of passing in an array, and mostly because you can optimize your code. You don't need to define a variable of articles right here if you're only going to use it to send it back to the view. What you can do is copying the actual value, replace the variable articles inside the array, and we can get rid of our variable declaration. Now we haven't defined the routes, right? So we can't magically navigate to Google Chrome, add /articles to the endpoint, and expect a view to open. To do so, we need to register the route. And if we navigate back to PHP Storm, you'll find a routes directory inside the root of your project. Once you open it, you'll find 4 files, but the one that we need in this episode is the web.php file. Now, Laravel defines one route by default, which is the welcome page, which is, once again, this page right here. Now, let me say directly, this is not the way that you will be using. So don't look at it. Now let's define a new route. We're going to use the same route class, colon. And if you want to define your routes individually, you can use a post right here, a get, a put, a delete, or whatever you need for your resource controller. But since we have defined a resource controller, we can use the resource method right here. What Laravel will do right here is automatically generating the necessary routes for common CRUD operations. Then we need to pass in 2 arguments inside the resource method. The first argument is a string of the URI segment. So basically what we just tried to do, where is it? Right here, the articles part. So let's say articles, and then we need to pass in a second argument, which will be the name of the controller. So let's say article controller, and just like in the controller, don't forget to import the controller class. Now, what we have done right here is saying that all methods inside the article controller can only be accessed through the /articles endpoint. Pretty cool, right? Let's navigate to the CLI for a moment, because Laravel has a pretty cool tool for us. Let's run the PHP artisan route list command, which will show you all the routes available in your application. And right here, you will find a total of 7 routes, which all have an URI prefix of articles. Before we actually continue on, let's delete the articles directory for a moment, because Laravel recently added something pretty cool. Let's navigate back to iterm. Let's run the PHP artisan command for a moment. And if we scroll up to the make section, where is it? Right here. You'll see, well, you probably don't know, that Laravel recently added the make::view command, which will create a new view for you. So what you can do right here is basically saying PHP artisan make::view. You can name it index, but this will not create a subdirectory for you. So let's say articles/index. Once we perform enter, you will see that it has created a new view for us inside an articles subdirectory, where the file name is index.play.php. If we then navigate back to PHP Storm, open our articles directory index.play.php file, you'll see that it has added a simple div, but right here, I'm simply going to add articles. On the line below, I'm going to add a for each. If we hit enter, you will see that it has created an opening for each tag and a closing for each tag. Now, I won't cover all these, but what I want to do right here is loop over the variable articles as one single article. Then inside the loop, I'm going to use a double curly brace syntax, as you can see right here. This is used for outputting data of variables in their rendered view. It is basically a echo or print syntax. So what we can do right here is say, well, print out the article. And the articles variable we're looping over is coming from the article controller because we've sent back a variable named articles. Now, if we navigate to the browser, refresh it, you will see that it is only printing out the keyword articles, and that's because the value of our articles is empty because we have not created rows inside our database. We can do that real quick because I have an external database client. Let me create it real quick. The user is root, password is Dari1234. The database is Laravel app. I'm gonna click on OK. I need to refresh it for a moment. I'm gonna create a user real quick. So let's say add a row. The ID is 1. The name is code with Dari. My email. Verified. Password is password. Typo. Updated at, created at. Perform it. It has been inserted. I'm going to create one article right now, and this is necessary because we need the user ID. So the ID is 1, the user ID is 1, the title is post 1, the excerpt is test, description is test, minutes to read is 1, and the timestamps. Now let's navigate back to the browser, refresh it, where right here you will see that it has outputted our entire post. Now you can't say that it only needs some output, let's say the title, inside the index.blade.php file. You need to use the arrow notation, so a dash and a greater than sign, where we're going to print out the title of the article. If we refresh it, you will see that post 1 has been added right here. For now, I want to leave the controller chapter even though we haven't finished the controller file, and move on to something which I personally enjoy when it comes to Laravel, and that's the packages they have to offer. And the coolest package in my opinion is Laravel Breeze. Laravel Breeze is part of Laravel's incredible ecosystem, which extends beyond the framework itself with the help of Composer. If we navigate to the browser for a moment, and navigate to the official website of Laravel, which is laravel.com, you will find a menu item in the top bar named Ecosystem. And once you click on it, you will see how big Laravel's ecosystem actually is. These items right here are all packages, libraries, and tools that you can add to your project. These packages can provide additional functionalities such as user authentication, API integration, payment processing, and way more. Some popular packages in Laravel's ecosystem include Laravel Nova, which is an admin panel for Laravel applications that allow developers to easily manage and visualize their application's data. We've got Laravel Horizon, which is a dashboard and queue manager for Laravel's queue system, which allows developers to monitor and manage background jobs. We've got Laravel Forge, which is a server management where you can host your Laravel application. And the one that we're going to install is the first one, which is called Laravel Breeze, which is a minimalistic and lightweight authentication system that provides features such as user registration, login, password reset, and email verification out of the box. One advantage that people don't talk about enough is that Laravel Breeze automatically installs Tailwind CSS, so you don't need to do that separately. Now Laravel Breeze needs to be installed through Composer. So let's navigate to the CLI for a moment and let's run the Composer require a package from Laravel itself / it's named Breeze, and we're going to add a -- dev flag to it, which ensures that Laravel Breeze is installed as a dev dependency and not as a regular dependency. Now keep in mind that this does not install the Breeze package out of the box. To do so, you need to run a newly created artisan command that Breeze has added for us, which is the php artisan breeze install command. This command will publish the authentication views, routes, controllers, and other resources to your application. Now, one pretty cool thing about Laravel Breeze is that it allows you to use different stacks. You can use Blade, Livewire, React, Vue, or the API only. In our case, we're simply going to stick to Blade with Alpine.js. Now, once we hit enter, you'll see that it's prompting us with a message asking if we want to add dark mode. Let's say yes. Then it's asking us about a testing framework, which we prefer is the newly framework named Pest. Now we have already run the php artisan migrate command, and Breeze uses the users table, so we don't need to run that command again. It has already built our front-end assets as well, but if you want to recompile it, you simply need to run npm run dev. Alright, now let's run the php artisan route list command for a moment. Because right here, you will see that Laravel Breeze has added a couple routes for us. We have the login endpoint, we have the logout endpoint, we have the password update, we have a profile endpoint, register, reset password, and verify email. let's navigate to the browser and let's have a look at the changes. If we open our local host and change our /articles endpoint to /, you will see that in the top right corner, this has added 2 new menu items for us, a login and register. Let's click on register. And right here, you will see that Laravel Breeze has installed a fully working registration form. So let's test it out. My name is Dari. My email is info@darinazar.com. It needs to be a different email than the one that I have added manually. My password is something very unique, and the confirm password as well. Now, once we click on register and close off this pop-up box, you will see that we have been redirected to the /dashboard endpoint, which is only accessible by authenticated users. It even offers a My Profile page. Let's click on our name in the top right corner, where you will find Profile. And once you click on it, you will see that you have a new form where you can change your name and email, you can update your password, and you can even delete your account. Now, let's quickly log out for a moment. And let's change the endpoint in the browser to /dashboard again. And right here, you will see that we have been redirected to the login endpoint. And that's because only authenticated users have access to the dashboard endpoint. Wonder how this works? Well, Laravel Breeze has added a ton of routes for us. So let's see how this works. Let's navigate back to PHPStorm for a moment. Let's open our web.php file, and inside the views directory, you can see tons of new directories. The auth directory, components, layouts, profile, dashboard, and way more. But what I want to focus on right now is this part. Right here, you will see the routes that you might notice, because it is a simple request to the /dashboard endpoint. It's returning the view method right here and not in the controller. But it has something attached to it which is new, and that's the middleware method right here. A middleware in Laravel acts as a bridge between a request and a response. It provides a convenient mechanism to filter HTTP requests entering your application. Middleware can provide various tasks such as validating input, authenticating users, and way more. Now, Laravel Breeze uses the auth middleware to protect certain routes that require authentication. The auth middleware verifies that the user is authenticated before allowing to access the protected routes. If a user is not authenticated, they will be redirected to the login page. Now, as you can see, the middleware method is accepting an array. So you could pass in multiple middlewares. And this endpoint actually does, because it has a second middleware named verified. Because verified basically means that the user should be verified to access the dashboard endpoint. And that is actually true. But it's a little bit different. Since every migration, let's open the users underscore table for a moment, ships with an email underscore verified underscore add column. Breeze has basically added the functionality, but it's up to the developer to enable it. And this needs to be done right inside of the user model, where right at the top, you need to implement right after the authenticatable. We need to add the keyword implements of must verify email. The must verify email is a built-in interface in Laravel. And by implementing the must verify email interface, Laravel automatically adds email verification functionalities to the user authentication system. This means that when a new user registers, they will receive an email with a verification link. Now, this only works if you have an email delivery platform set up in your .env file, where you will find, where is it? Right here, your mailing credentials. Now, I usually use Mailtrap, and I don't want to set it up right now, but what I can do is copying my credentials from my second file, replacing it with the credentials in the .env file, navigate to the website of Mailtrap. Alright, as you can see, I'm logged in, and if you want to do the same thing as what I just did, you basically need to change the integration to Laravel and copy your credentials right here. But what I want to show right now is going back to our local host, click on forgot your password, add an email of info@codewithdari.com, click on email password reset link, and as you can see, we have been prompted with this message saying we have emailed your password reset link. We then open Mailtrap, you'll see a new email right here, which says that we can reset our password through this button. And once we click on it, we can add a new password. Now we don't got that much time left, so let me quickly show you how you could easily deploy a Laravel application on VPS hosting using Hostinger. And VPS stands for Virtual Private Server, which is a type of hosting that uses virtualization technology to create several virtual servers on a single physical server. Now if we open a new tab and open the official website of Hostinger, which is hostinger.com, where you have a menu item in the top right named Hosting, and once you click on it, you will find an option named VPS Hosting, where if you scroll down a little bit, you will find the different VPS hosting packages. Now as you can see right here, they're offering different types of discounts, starting at 57%, going up to 63%. Looking at the prices, I got to say that the prices are pretty affordable when it comes to hosting. If you host a Laravel project on cloud hosting, you most likely pay a little bit less or even maybe the same depending on what you're going to host your project. If we look at the features that all the packages have to offer, you will see that the bottom 5 are featured on all packages. It's AI Assistant, full access root, a dedicated IP address, and it has a weekly backup. Now based on the price and type of plan, a lot of feature will vary. Personally, I would always recommend using a 2V CPU core, because it improves the performance, it is scalable, and it has efficient resource allocation. So for now, let's choose the KVM2 package, where right here you could either choose to pay for a month, which makes the price more expensive since it will be $18.99, or you could pay for 12 months, which will bring the price down quite a lot. Now quick note, Hostinger offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, which allows you to test it out and see whether any type of hosting suits your requirements. For now, we're going to choose the 12-month deal, and if we scroll down, you will see that we have the second step, where we have to add our payment credentials. So I am already logged in. If you're not, step number 2 will be creating an account, and step number 3 will be selecting your payment. Now, right here, you will find an overview of the total price, which is $116. We have a plan discount of 58%, which is quite awesome. Right under our total, you can see that we can add a coupon code. And once we click on it, add the coupon code of code with Dari. Click on apply. You will see that a discount of 10% has been applied. And you will receive another discount of, let's say, $12, because the price has now been decreased to $104. And in my opinion, paying $104 for a 12-month VPS hosting is a great price. For now, add your payment credentials right here, and I'll see you back once you have created your account in the dashboard of Hostinger. Now right here, you can see that we can set up our VPS hosting. So let's click on Start Now, where we need to choose the location of our VPS. Now the location of a VPS server can and will have an impact on website loading speed and overall performance. This is because the physical distance between the server and the user can affect the amount of time it takes for data to travel back and forth. Since I'm currently located in the Netherlands, I'm going to choose the Netherlands and I'm going to continue on, because for the next step, we need to choose our operating system. There are 3 options right here, and one of them is an option that we're not going to use, which is the applications option, because it's for WordPress. And I want to get my hands dirty, so I'm going to click on plain operating system. Now the next step is the type of control panel we would like to use. I have pretty much always been using Ubuntu. So that's pretty much my choice right here. So let's click on it. Let's click on continue. Now for the next step, we need to set up our control panel password. So let's add a password right here. Let's click on save and continue. Right here, you will find an overview of the VPS location, the operating system, and the host name. And once you're satisfied, just click on finish setup. Now this will take a moment or two, so pause the video and I will see you back once that's done. Alright, as you can see, we're located on our H panel where you will see an overview of the server. On the VPS information tab, you will find your dedicated IP address right here, the status of your VPS, which is running, which has not been set because our VPS has just been created, the current operating system, the location, and the node. In the SSH Access tab, you will find information on how you can access your application through SSH. You will find your IP address, the user, the password, the port, the IPv6, and the terminal command to access your SSH. Now on the final tab, which is Plan Details, you will find some information that we have covered before. But one pretty cool feature about VPS that I want to show you is the Manage VPS section right at the bottom, where you can upgrade your VPS on the go. In other words, it's scalable, meaning that you can upgrade your plan without having any trouble. In case you want to do that, you simply need to click on Upgrade VPS. Now, I don't want to cover all the tabs to the left right here, because we do need to continue on with the installation part, which needs to be done through a VPS manager. A VPS manager is a tool that allows you to manage your virtual private server through a graphical interface. It provides an easy way to perform tasks such as installing software, configuring settings, and managing files. Now, the VPS manager that I recommend is named Server Avatar. I'm not going to cover the setup part because it is pretty straightforward. I'm simply going to log into my server avatar and continue from there. So pause the video and continue on when you're ready. As you can see, I'm currently logged into my server avatar account, where I can connect to a new VPS hosting. So let's click on Create. Now let's say Server. Alright. Like I've just mentioned, Server Avatar is a VPS manager tool that allows you to manage your virtual private server through a graphical interface. And I think that the screen right here should make a lot of sense for most developers. You can connect to a custom server, but you can also choose between Amazon, DigitalOcean, and a couple other options. What we need to do is selecting the custom server because we have our hosting provider, which is Hostinger. Then we need to add the server name, which we can find in our overview, VPS information, right at the top, which is the server name that has been auto-created for us. So let's paste it right here. Then we need to add our IP address, which we could also find inside our panel right here. So let's copy it and paste it right here. Then we need to add our root password, which we have created, but in case you have forgot your password already, you can navigate to SSH Access and change it right here. This will take up to 60 minutes, so I'm not going to perform that. I'm simply going to add the password that I have created. The SSH port is 22 by default, and if we navigate to our overview, you will see that the default SSH port is 22. Then we need to select our tech stack, and I want to use Apache, so I'm simply going to use the LAMP option. I want a database of MySQL, and I want to install Node.js. Makes sense, right? The typical setup when you want to deploy a Laravel application, but this time on a VPS server. Let's click on Connect Now. Alright, as you could see, we're connected to our VPS and the installation part right here might take a bit. So once again, pause the video and I will see you back once this is done. Alright, as you could see right here, our environment has been set up and there are so many configurations you could see and configure right here. From databases to server load to memory usage to disk usage and even to application users. I can't cover these all, so I want to continue on by setting up our project. I want to deploy my project through Git. So let's quickly click on the Integrations tab in the sidebar, where you can see that you can link your Bitbucket, GitHub, and GitLab accounts. I want to choose link my GitHub account, so give me a moment. And as you can see, my GitHub account has successfully been linked to my server avatar. So let's click on the Servers tab. Now let's click on the server that we have created. Now the next step is creating an application. So inside the sidebar, you will see applications. Let's click on it. Let's create a new application. And I'm going to make a test project. So I'm going to enter a basic application name. Let's say Hostinger Filament PHP. It will be on a test domain. And the test domain will also be Hostinger Filament PHP. Now let's click on next step. Well, apparently my subdomain has already been created. So let's say Hostinger Filament. Next step. All right. For the second step, we need to select a method and how we want to deploy our project into our application. I have added my project into a GitHub repository, which you will find right here. So what I can do right here is click on Git, select the service provider, which will be GitHub, where you will see a couple options that we could add. And here comes the tricky part. Whenever you are working with a private repository, you need to add a deploy key to your project. Right now, my repository right here is, where is it? Private. But once this video goes live, I will change the visibility to public. And if we navigate back to server avatar and click on public, you will see that we don't need to add the deploy key, and you can simply use the HTTPS URL that you can find right here to clone this project. Now this is the easiest method, but in 99% of the cases, your repository will be private. So let's set that up before we continue on. In GitHub, let's click on the Settings tab, where in the left sidebar right under Security, you will find a Deploy Keys option. And once you click on it, you'll see a new option where you can add your deploy key. Right here, we need to create a new title and add a deploy key through server avatar. So let's navigate back to server avatar, click on private, say generate SSH key. Let's copy it. Let's navigate back to GitHub. Let's name it server avatar. Let's paste our SSH key inside the key text area. There's no need to add server avatar write access, so let's add our key. Alright, as you can see, it has been added. Alright, as you can see right here, our deploy key has been successfully added. So let's navigate back to server avatar, because we need to select our account, which will be info@codewithari.com. Let's select the repository, which will be hostinger-filament, and we need to select a branch, which will be the master branch. And then you have the option to add a deploy script. Now, whenever you open my GitHub repository, which I have linked in the description down below, you will find the deploy key as well. But I will keep the steps right here relatively easily. So let's add a couple commands right here. Let's say git pull. After the git pull, we need to clone the .env.example file. So let's say cp.env.example to a file named .env. We're going to run the php artisan key :generate command. We're going to install or update Composer. So let's say composer install --no-dev --optimize-autoloader. We're then going to run php artisan route cache, php artisan cache clear, and finally php artisan migrate. Now let's click on next step. Then we need to choose our system user. I don't recommend using admin right here, so let's choose new user. Let's name it Code with Dari, and the password will be very secret. Click on next step. Then we need to select our PHP version. For Laravel 10 Plus, I'm always going to use PHP 8.2. Let's click on next step. Now let's review it for a moment, and everything seems fine. So let's say create application. Now there's one more setting that I want to update real quick. So let's navigate to servers. Let's open our server. Now let's click on settings right here, because I want to update the PHP CLI version to 8.2 as well. Now if we think about it for a moment, there are some steps that we have missed, right? We haven't created a database, and we most definitely haven't set it up inside our .env file. So let's click on databases. And right here, we're going to create a new database. We're going to name it Hostinger-Filament. We're going to set up a custom username and password, where the username will be CodeWithDari, and you will see my password in a bit, which will be test1234 ! We're not going to add the remote IP, so let's click on create a database. And as you can see, we have been prompted with a message saying that our database has been created successfully. So what we could do right now is navigating to our applications, open our Hostinger-Filament PHP app, where we have an option in the sidebar which says File Manager. Once we open it, you'll see a familiar structure, so open the public.html file, where we need to show hidden files. And right here, you will see the .env file. And once you open it, you can edit it right here. So I'm going to keep it simple right here. I'm going to change the database name to Hostinger-Filament. The user is CodeWithDari, and the password is test1234 ! Let's click on save. It takes 5 seconds, so give it a moment. Click on yes, I'm sure. All right. Now, if we navigate back to our application, you'll see that somewhere, if it shows up, we'll open our project first. It has a primary domain. And once we click on it, you'll see a forbidden, which means that the error code is 403. This is happening because Laravel doesn't really understand our project structure, and we can create a new hidden file named htaccess. So let's navigate back and let's open our file manager again, the public_HTML. Let's say create a new file. Let's name it .htaccess. Let's tick the show hidden files checkbox. Let's open our .htaccess file. And I'll just add a piece of code right here as a comment, since it's very easy to make mistakes right here. So just follow along or copy the comment or from my repository. So I'm going to paste it right here. I'm going to click on Save Changes. I'm going to wait 5 more seconds. All right, yes, I'm sure. If I navigate back to my local host and refresh it, you will see the second error, which is a 500 error. And this is happening because our deploy script couldn't be performed since we had no database connection. So what we can do is 2 options: change it in server avatar, or we could open our VPS, copy our terminal command, navigate to a terminal, paste it right here and hit enter. I do want to use a fingerprint, so let's say yes. My password is a password that I have added myself. And as you can see, I have been connected. So what I need to do right here is change directories into my home directory. If I perform an ls, you will see a code with Dari directory. So let's say cd code with Dari. If we perform another ls, you will find the directory that we have created ourselves. So let's say cd hostinger, another ls, open the public directory, perform another ls where you will see a Laravel project. So pretty straightforward right here. Let's say composer update. All right, it's installing all packages that are required. Then we need to run the php artisan key : generate command. Finally, we can run the php artisan optimize : clear command. Once we navigate back to the browser, open our local host and refresh it, you will see that our Laravel project is visible in the browser. Alright, this was it for this video where we covered the basics of a Laravel application in just 1 hour. Don't forget to use my discount code to get 10% off on your next hosting or order. And if you do like my content and you want to see more, leave this video a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button.